Amma was 60 years old, but her face still carried the beauty of a woman who had lived with love and sacrifice. She had raised her son, Kojo, alone after her husband passed away many years earlier. Life had not been easy for her. She worked long hours in the market, selling fruits and vegetables, sometimes walking miles with baskets on her head, just to provide food for Kojo. Every coin she earned went toward his schooling, his clothes, and his future. She wanted him to grow into a man who would bring honor to the family, but the boy she raised with such devotion had changed. Kojo, now in his early 20s, had grown arrogant. He no longer saw the struggles of his mother as something noble. Instead, he saw her simple life as shameful. His friends, who came from wealthier homes, teased him about Amma's worn-out clothes and her tired hands. At first, Kojo felt embarrassed, but slowly he allowed their laughter to turn into pride for himself and scorn for his mother. He began to avoid her in public, pretending not to know her when his friends were near. Amma noticed the change but said nothing. She thought perhaps time would teach him, perhaps kindness would win his heart back. She continued to cook for him, to wait for him late into the night when he went out, and to whisper prayers for him when she saw him asleep. She still believed that the boy she had raised with love was inside him somewhere, waiting to come back. But Kojo grew colder. He wanted to impress his friends at any cost. One afternoon, while they gathered outside a small shop, Amma passed by carrying a basket filled with yams. The load was heavy and her steps were slow. She stopped near Kojo, hoping he might help, but instead of kindness she received cruelty. Kojo's friends began to laugh at her, whispering among themselves, mocking her old dress and the sweat on her brow. Kojo felt their eyes on him. He felt their laughter pushing him, daring him to prove he was not like her. In that moment he did something Amma never imagined her son could do. He turned to her, his face cold, and shouted words that pierced her heart. "Why are you always following me? Can't you see you embarrass me? Go home and stop shaming me." His friends roared with laughter. Amma's lips trembled, but before she could reply, Kojo pushed her basket aside and kicked her lightly on the leg. It was not a hard kick, but it was harder than any blow she had ever received in her life. The pain was not on her body but deep inside her chest. Her own son, the one she carried in her womb, the one she held in her arms, had raised his foot against her in front of strangers. The boys clapped and laughed. Kojo forced a laugh too, trying to appear bold, but in his mother's eyes he saw something that silenced him. Amma did not scream. She did not curse. She did not even raise her hand to stop him. She only looked at him, her eyes heavy with sorrow, her heart bleeding silently. Then, with slow steps, she bent down, picked up her basket, and walked away without a word. Her dignity in that moment was greater than any insult. She held her back straight though her heart was broken. She walked away with tears in her eyes, but she did not let them fall until she was alone. The street that had once felt alive now felt empty. The laughter of the boys still echoed in her ears like cruel drums, each beat cutting her deeper. When Amma reached home, she placed the basket on the table and sat down quietly. She touched her leg where Kojo's kick had landed, but the physical pain was nothing compared to what she felt in her spirit. She thought of her late husband, how he had told her before his death to raise Kojo with strength and kindness. She thought of the nights she had stayed awake to feed him when he was a baby. She thought of the days she had gone hungry so he could eat. All those memories now came back, mixing with the bitter truth of what had happened. Yet Amma did not curse him. She did not call down anger upon him. Instead, she whispered a prayer. "God, open his eyes. Teach him what I cannot teach with words. Let him understand before it is too late." Kojo, meanwhile, felt a brief sting of guilt as his mother walked away, but it quickly vanished under the cheers of his friends. They clapped him on the back and told him he had been brave. They praised him for putting his mother in her place. Kojo smiled proudly, not realizing that the very act he thought made him strong was the beginning of his fall. That night, Amma lay in bed unable to sleep. Her tears wet the pillow but her mind stayed calm. She knew her son had lost his way, but she also knew that life has a way of teaching lessons. She promised herself she would not return cruelty with cruelty. She would not fight him with anger. Instead, she would fight with patience, with dignity, and with her own strength. The kick he gave her in front of his friends did not only hurt her body, it planted a seed inside her heart. It was the seed of a decision that she would no longer live as a shadow of her son's pride. She would rise, not to take revenge with words or violence, but to show him and the world that dignity cannot be destroyed by insult. And so, while Kojo laughed with his friends, feeling proud of himself, Amma began to plan her next steps. The world had seen her humiliation, but one day the world would see her strength. The son who had shamed his mother would one day face the weight of his actions, not because she cursed him, but because life itself would turn the tables. Amma closed her eyes that night, and though her heart was heavy, there was a quiet fire inside her soul. It was the beginning of something neither Kojo nor his friends could imagine. At home, Amma sat alone, her old wooden chair creaking softly as she leaned forward, her face buried in her hands. The room was quiet, but her heart was not. It was heavy with sorrow. Tears slipped down her wrinkled cheeks, falling one by one onto the cloth on her lap. She wept, not only for the insult she had endured but for the son she no longer recognized. She remembered the years when her life had been nothing but sacrifice. She saw in her mind the mornings when she rose before the sun, walking miles to the market with a heavy basket on her head. She thought of the nights when she returned home exhausted, her feet swollen and her back aching, yet still cooked food for Kojo with a smile. Many times she had skipped meals so that he could eat enough. Many times she had worn old clothes so that he could have new ones for school. Every pain she bore was carried with one thought, that one day Kojo would stand tall as a man of honor. Now that dream seemed far away. The boy she had carried on her back, the boy whose first steps had filled her with joy, had raised his foot against her. And he had done it in laughter, in the presence of strangers. Amma wept, not because of the kick itself but because of the emptiness behind it. Kojo's heart had turned cold. He had chosen pride over love. After her tears had slowed, Amma folded her hands and whispered a prayer. Her voice was shaky but her words were steady. God, give me strength. Do not let bitterness live in my heart. Do not let me curse my son. He is blind now, but open his eyes before it is too late. She paused and took a deep breath. Then she whispered again, I will not repay evil with evil. But I cannot let him walk this path without learning. He must understand what respect means. He must feel what it is to lose it. Amma wiped her tears and sat up straighter. Her body was tired, but inside her a new fire was lit. She was not a woman of anger, she was a woman of dignity. She decided that she would not shout at Kojo or fight him with words. She would teach him a lesson through life itself. She knew that respect cannot be forced with threats or fear. It must be born in the heart, and sometimes, the only teacher strong enough is hardship. That night, as Kojo stumbled into the house after drinking with his friends, Amma said nothing. She did not ask where he had been. She did not argue or complain. She quietly placed his food on the table and watched him eat without a word. Her silence was not weakness. It was the calm before the storm. In the days that followed, Amma carried herself with quiet strength. She continued her work, selling in the market, tending to her small farm and caring for the house. But inside she was making plans. She decided she would no longer depend on Kojo for her pride or her future. She would build her own strength not only for herself but also to show him what true dignity looked like. Each evening when she returned from the market, she sat by the lamp and thought deeply. She remembered her younger days when her husband was still alive. He had told her once, Amma, never let life break you. Stand tall no matter how heavy the burden. Those words returned to her now. She realized she had allowed her love for Kojo to blind her. She had carried him so long that he no longer knew the weight of responsibility. It was time to let him face life on his own, to taste the bitterness of his own choices. Amma decided to join a women's cooperative in the town. She had heard other widows speak of it before, a group where women work together to learn new skills, share trade and support one another. She knew it would not be easy at her age, but she also knew she could not sit still and watch her son waste away in arrogance. She needed to grow stronger for herself and for him. The first time she told Kojo about her decision, he laughed. What will you do there, mother? You are too old to learn new things. Just stay home and leave the world to younger people like me. His words stung, but Amma only smiled quietly. She did not argue. She knew that soon enough, life itself would answer him. At night, when Kojo was gone with his friends, Amma prayed again. Her prayers were always the same. She asked for strength, not revenge. She asked for wisdom, not anger. She asked for her son's heart to be humbled, even if it meant he would have to fall. She prayed that one day he would kneel not before her but before his own conscience and realize the pain he had caused. In the following weeks, Amma began attending the cooperative. The women there welcomed her kindly. They taught her small trades like weaving mats, making soap and selling simple goods. Amma listened carefully, her old hands learning new skills. She began to earn a little money of her own, and with each coin she saved, she felt her spirit grow stronger. Meanwhile, Kojo continued his life of pride. He spent long nights with his friends, drinking, laughing and wasting money. He ignored his mother's efforts, believing she was just wasting her time. But while he sank deeper into idleness, Amma's respect in the community began to grow. People admired her for her courage, for her will to rise at her age, and for the dignity she carried in silence. Amma never forgot the kick, the insult, the laughter. The wound in her heart remained, but she refused to let it turn into hate. Instead, she used it as fuel. She reminded herself every day that the pain had given her strength. It had pushed her to stand tall, to no longer depend on the son who had disrespected her. And deep inside, she knew that life was already preparing Kojo's lesson. His arrogance would not protect him forever. His friends would not stand by him when his wealth and pride were gone. Amma knew that when that day came, he would remember her silence. He would remember her dignity. And he would finally understand. Amma slowly joined the women's cooperative in town. At first she felt shy. She was older than most of the women there, and her hands were stiff from years of hard work. But the women welcomed her warmly. They told her that age was not a barrier to learning, and that strength lived in the heart, not only in the body. Encouraged by their words, Amma began to learn new things every day. The cooperative was a place full of life. The women gathered in a small hall with open windows. Laughter often filled the room as they shared stories of their struggles and their dreams. Some women made soap, others wove mats, and others sold vegetables. Amma listened carefully and asked questions. Her mind was alert, and though her fingers were not as quick as the younger women, her determination made her steady. She started small. At first, she learned how to weave mats from dried palm leaves. Her first mat was rough, the edges uneven, but the other women clapped for her, saying, "Amma, you will get better." And she did. With practice, her hands moved more smoothly, and soon her mats began to look neat and strong. She sold her first one in the market and held the small coins in her hand with pride. Amma also learned how to make soap. She laughed when she spilled the mixture the first time, and the other women teased her kindly. But she did not give up. With patience and courage, she mastered the skill. Slowly, she began selling small bars of soap at the market. The people admired her work. They said her soap was simple but clean, and her mats were strong and useful. Little by little, Amma grew strong and independent. Each day she walked to the cooperative with her head held higher than before. The pain in her heart still lived there, but it was now covered with the light of purpose. She no longer sat at home waiting for Kojo to change. She no longer measured her worth by his behavior. Instead, she built her own dignity. The people in the town noticed. They began to speak about Amma with respect. "She is a woman of courage," they said. "At her age, she is still learning, still working, still moving forward." Her name spread, not as a mother who had been insulted by her son, but as a woman who had risen with strength. Meanwhile, Kojo's path was very different. He spent his days with his careless friends, laughing loudly in the streets, drinking late into the night and sleeping long into the morning. He wasted money on things that brought him no value. He bought new clothes just to show off, food that he threw away, and drinks for his friends who praised him only while his pockets were full. Kojo ignored his mother. When he passed her, he barely looked at her face. In his eyes, she was just an old woman wasting her time with small trades. He thought he was better because he had friends who cheered for him and a life that seemed easy. He did not see that his so-called friends were using him, feeding his pride while emptying his hands. Amma, however, saw it all. She did not argue with him. She simply watched quietly. Her heart ached to see him fall deeper into waste, but she had chosen her path. She would not chase after him. She would let life be his teacher. Slowly, the difference between them grew. Amma's name rose with honor, while Kojo's name began to sink in shame. When people in the market spoke of Amma, they admired her courage. They told their children, "Look at Amma. Learn from her. See how she stands tall, even after hardship." But when they spoke of Kojo, they shook their heads. "Such a shame," they whispered. "A young man with no respect, wasting his days." Kojo did not notice at first. He was too busy laughing with his friends. But little by little, things began to change. His friends grew tired of him when he had no money to spend. They began to avoid him, leaving him alone in the evenings. Kojo felt the emptiness but told himself it was nothing. Still, the laughter around him grew quieter, and he began to feel a strange silence in his heart. Amma, on the other hand, grew brighter. She saved the little money she earned and used it wisely. She repaired her roof, bought herself new clothes, and even helped some of the younger women in the cooperative when they struggled. Her kindness made people admire her even more. Children greeted her with smiles when she passed, and neighbors came to her for advice. One day, Kojo walked through the market and heard people talking. He expected to hear them call his name with respect, But instead, he heard laughter behind his back. Someone said, "There goes Kojo, the one who disrespected his own mother." Another added, "He is nothing compared to Amma. She is the true strength of her family." The words cut him like a knife. For the first time, Kojo felt the weight of shame. He walked faster, trying to escape the whispers, but they followed him in his heart. That night, when he lay on his bed, he thought about his mother. He remembered her silence after he insulted her, the way she never argued, the way she walked with dignity. And now he realized the world saw her as greater than him. Amma did not speak of his shame. She continued her life with peace. But inside, she knew the lesson was already beginning. Kojo had once laughed at her, but now the people laughed at him. Life was turning its wheel slowly but surely, and Amma knew her son was about to face the truth he had been avoiding. She remained patient, still praying at night for him, but no longer with tears. She prayed with strength, saying, "God, I leave him in your hands. Let him see the light in his own time." And as Kojo's pride began to crumble, Amma's dignity stood taller than ever. Kojo's friends abandoned him when his money was gone. At first, he thought it was only a small distance, that they would return when they missed his company. But days passed, and the ones who once laughed loudly at his jokes no longer came to his side. They walked past him in the streets, pretending not to see him. Some even whispered and mocked him the way they had once mocked his mother. Kojo felt his pride breaking, but he tried to hold it together with false smiles. Inside he was sinking. The debts began to grow. He had borrowed money from shopkeepers, from neighbors, and even from strangers, always with promises he never kept. Now they stood at his door, demanding what he owed. "Kojo, pay what you took," they said. "We cannot wait forever." He had no answer. His pockets were empty, and his friends who had once clapped for him in the tavern offered no coin, no comfort, not even a kind word. Loneliness wrapped itself around him like a cold blanket. The evenings that once rang with laughter now echoed with silence. He sat alone in the small room that once felt full of life, but now only smelled of stale food and broken dreams. He thought of the days he had wasted, the drinks he had poured, the coins he had thrown away to impress people who had never truly cared for him. He realized that he had been blind, walking proudly on a path that led only to shame. Desperate, he went to the marketplace where people once praised his mother's courage. He asked for help. "Please," he said to a shopkeeper, "give me something to eat, I will repay you soon." But the man shook his head. "Kojo," he replied, "we know who you are. You laughed when you hurt your mother. How can we trust a man who does not respect his own blood?" The words cut him deeper than hunger. He turned away, his face burning with shame. He went to another, an old neighbor who had once shared bread with his family. "Help me," Kojo begged. But the woman looked at him with sad eyes. "Son, you dishonored Amma. Everyone saw it. How can you ask for kindness when you gave her none?" Everywhere he turned, the answer was the same. People reminded him of his cruelty, of the day he had kicked his own mother in front of his friends. That memory followed him like a shadow. He could not escape it. The laughter that once felt powerful now echoed back at him as a curse. Meanwhile, Amma walked with quiet strength. Her small business was growing. The women in the cooperative loved her gentle spirit, and the townspeople admired her wisdom. When she passed through the market, people greeted her with smiles. Some called her Mother Amma, a name filled with respect. She was no longer seen as just an old woman. She was seen as a symbol of dignity. Kojo saw her sometimes from afar. He wanted to run to her, to beg her for help, but he stopped himself. He remembered the pain in her eyes on the day he had humiliated her. She had not shouted, had not cursed, had not raised a hand. She had only walked away with dignity. Now that silence felt louder than any punishment. Amma knew of his troubles. People told her that Kojo was in debt, that he wandered hungry, that he was no longer surrounded by friends. But she did not run to rescue him. She loved him, yes, but she also knew that some lessons must be learned through pain. She whispered prayers at night, asking God to guide her son, but she did not interfere. She allowed him to feel the full weight of his actions. This became her silent revenge. Not revenge in anger or cruelty, but a revenge that came from patience and wisdom. She did not raise her hand against him, she did not speak words of bitterness. Instead, she stood strong while life itself became his teacher. Her dignity was sharper than any sword. It cut through his pride without her needing to touch him. Kojo began to notice the difference. Where people once avoided him, they now welcomed Amma. Where his name was spoken with shame, hers was spoken with honor. He remembered the way he had laughed at her, and now the same people who had clapped for him praised her. The more he saw her rise, the smaller he felt. At night, He lay awake thinking of the time she had sacrificed for him. He remembered the evenings she had gone hungry so that he could eat. He remembered the mornings she had walked to the market, tired and weary, just to provide for him. And he remembered how he had repaid her, with a kick, with laughter, with disrespect. The memories haunted him until his chest ached. Kojo's debts grew heavier. Some men threatened him when he could not pay. He hid from them, running down dark alleys to escape their anger. He had no home of peace, no place of rest. His once proud shoulders now bent low, his once loud voice now fell silent. He was no longer the strong young man who laughed in the streets. He was a broken soul searching for a way back. Amma did not mock him, though she knew of his suffering. She simply lived her life with grace. She greeted people kindly, worked hard, and shared her wisdom with those who listened. Her silence toward Kojo spoke louder than words. It told him, "You chose your path. Now walk it." The townspeople noticed this too. They said, "Amma is wise. She does not need to shout. She does not need revenge through anger. Her strength is her patience, and through it, her son will learn." Kojo felt the truth of their words each day. The weight of loneliness pressed on him. The shame of his actions burned in his heart. And yet, beneath the pain, a seed of change began to grow. He started to see that his mother's strength was not weakness. Her silence was not fear. It was power. Her revenge was not in destroying him with her hands but in letting him destroy himself through his own choices. Her victory was in her dignity, in rising above the insult he had thrown at her. Kojo finally saw it. He finally felt it. And in that heavy realization he began to understand the value of respect, the power of humility, and the greatness of his mother. Finally, Kojo returned home broken. His clothes were worn, his eyes hollow, and his heart heavy with shame. The young man who once walked proudly in the streets now moved with slow, uncertain steps. The house he had once ignored now stood before him like a mountain, both familiar and distant. For many nights he had dreamed of this moment, yet fear held him back. He wondered if his mother would turn away, just as he had once turned his back on her. Inside the small home, Amma sat quietly weaving a mat. Her hands moved steadily, her mind calm. She had heard whispers from the neighbors that her son had been seen wandering with sorrow on his face. She knew this day would come, but she did not rush it. She simply continued her life with patience, waiting for him to face the truth. When Kojo finally pushed open the door, Amma lifted her eyes. For a moment, silence filled the room. Kojo's lips trembled as he looked at her, and all the words he had planned to say vanished. He fell to his knees at her feet, tears rolling down his cheeks. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Mother, forgive me. I was blind. I was foolish. I mocked you, I hurt you, and I threw away your love. Please forgive me." Amma looked at her son for a long moment. The sight of him broken filled her heart with both pain and relief. She had prayed for this moment, prayed that life would humble him without destroying him completely. Slowly she reached out her hand and touched his shoulder. "Kojo," she said gently, "I forgive you." Her words broke the last of his pride. He lowered his head to the ground, sobbing like a child. The strong, arrogant young man who had once laughed at his mother was now humbled by her grace. Amma's forgiveness was not weak, it was strong. She had every reason to turn him away, to remind him of the day he kicked her in front of his friends. But instead she chose mercy. Still, she did not let him forget the lesson. She lifted his chin and looked into his eyes. "Respect," she told him, "is not demanded by age or by force. It is earned by how we live, by how we treat others. You forgot this and it led you to shame. Dignity is not given, it is built. Remember this, Kojo. You must walk with humility if you want to rise again." Kojo nodded, his tears soaking the floor. Those words carved themselves into his heart. For the first time in his life he truly listened. News of Kojo's return spread through the town. People whispered to one another that he had come back to Amma, kneeling at her feet, begging for forgiveness. Some shook their heads, remembering the day he had mocked her, but others smiled, saying, "At least he has learned." And above all, they admired Amma. They saw her not only as a mother but as a woman of great strength. She had faced insult and pain, yet she had risen with dignity, and now she showed forgiveness when others might have chosen bitterness. Her story spread everywhere. Mothers told their children, "Learn from Amma. See how patience is stronger than anger. See how forgiveness can heal even deep wounds." Fathers spoke to their sons, saying, "Do not dishonor your parents, for life will humble you. Respect them and peace will follow you." Amma became a living lesson in the community. People began to say, "Dishonoring parents leads only to downfall, but honoring them brings peace." Kojo himself became the proof of this truth. His downfall had been public, but so was his repentance. Wherever he went, people looked at him differently, not with admiration but with the reminder of what happens when pride blinds a person. Kojo worked hard to rebuild his life. He helped his mother with her trade, carrying mats to the market, selling soap and repairing things in the house. He no longer walked with arrogant friends, for they had left him behind. Instead, he walked beside Amma, quietly, humbly, learning from her wisdom. Amma did not speak often of the past, but when she did, her words were gentle and firm. "Kojo," she would say, "never forget where pride led you. Walk in respect and your path will be steady. Forget and you will stumble again." He listened carefully, for he knew her words were not just advice, they were truth written by his own life. In time, the bond between mother and son grew stronger than it had ever been. Kojo saw Amma not as a weak old woman but as the pillar that held his life together. He admired her courage, her patience, and her quiet strength. And Amma, though her heart still carried the scars of his betrayal, found peace in his change. The town continued to admire her. Children greeted her with joy, neighbors sought her advice, and her name was spoken with respect. People often repeated her story, reminding one another that true strength does not come from anger or revenge but from patience, dignity, and forgiveness. Kojo never forgot the lesson. Every time he thought of his past, he felt the weight of shame, but he also felt the light of his mother's forgiveness. He understood now that her silent revenge had not been to destroy him but to let him destroy his pride. And her greatest victory was not in seeing him broken, but in seeing him rise again with humility. In the end, Amma's story was not just about a son who disrespected his mother. It was about the power of dignity, the strength of patience, and the healing of forgiveness. Her life became a mirror for others to see themselves, to measure their actions, and to learn. And though Kojo had fallen, he rose again through her grace. Amma's heart, once broken, was mended by the peace that came from knowing her son had finally learned. The pain of the past could not be erased, but it was softened by the present. She knew that life had done its work and she was grateful. The town never forgot. They told her story for years to come, passing it down to the next generation. And in every telling, the lesson remained clear. Dishonoring parents leads to downfall, but honoring them brings peace. And so, Amma's quiet strength and Kojo's painful lesson became more than just a family story. They became a truth that lived in the hearts of everyone who heard it.